Welcome to The Nation. I'm Melissa Ong. Now, bullying today doesn't just hurt, it shatters trust, sanity and futures. In Malaysia, reported cases have surged nearly 20-fold since 2021, with violent forms spiking over 70 times. Now, to help us unpack the deeper layers behind these crises, we're joined by Dr. FATIMAH ALZAHRAH Syed HUSSIEN, Assistant Professor of Sociology from International Islamic University, Malaysia. Dr. FATIMAH, thank you for being here and thank you for helping us unpack what it means in this time and age where bullying is one of the critical issues. Now, bullying cases in Malaysia surged nearly 20-fold, as we know, and from 2021 to 2024, with violent incidents rising over 77 times. Now, what's fueling this explosive growth? Are there cases really increasing, or are students finally stepping out?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is such an important issue to talk about, and I think we have a lot more attention now to talk about it. So we should really use the space to emphasize some important things. I think it can be both. It doesn't just have to be one, that it is either students are just more brave to report, or that there are just more cases. So I think in some ways we have had more cases of reporting, so that could positively reflect that more young people or students are willing or are taught how to report. So in this way, that's a positive sign. But we also know that there are more cases as well, and this could be related to several things that has changed in our society. I think the first one is to address that maybe in the past we didn't have to think about cyberbullying. So this limitless almost platforms extends and expands cases of bullying, and it may not look the same way as we used to understand bullying. So that in some ways have expanded what bullying looks like, but also the changing scape of our society and how we relate to each other, and how connected we are to each other, and whether or not we are looking into those values apart from measuring things that are more materialistic. Are we also focusing on values that sort of takes care of each other? And maybe we have not given as much attention to those issues as well.
Earlier, we were just saying that we both have 14-year-old. Mine is a boy, and I'm just wondering, is the battleground shifted from playgrounds to phones? As you know that you've also said about cyberbullying. Your thoughts on this?
I think when we talk about phones and usage of gadgets or technology among children, number one is new spaces for bullying and new types of bullying, which is cyberbullying, but also how using technology, maybe when it's not properly monitored, guided, then there are also other issues. So studies have shown that certain types of content or certain types of games are related to certain aggressive behaviors or encouraging certain aggressive behaviors. And whether or not as parents we're playing our roles, and also the government, for example, introducing proper monitoring policies around who is running certain things, just as how we have certain grades for movies and things like that. Some games are not meant for smaller children. Then these games, for example, may enhance certain types of aggression, or excessive time spent on technology or the screen without proper monitoring on what contents they are, and these are also related to these types of issues. But in the context of cyberbullying, whether or not we've taught our children, number one, how to respectfully use those technologies and spaces, and whether it's appropriate in terms of their age. Like smaller children should not use social media, and when they know how to use social media, how to keep themselves safe, and how to treat others. But also, I think what's really important is whether or not we are actually demonstrating good behavior to our children, and this is sort of not unique to this time. Always, forever, we've always have to show good examples to our children, because our children are sort of products of socialization, that they see what we do, and then they learn how to do or not to do something.
Right, I think this kind of cases are, of course, for cyberbullying especially. I think I read earlier that even Australia has banned some of the social media platforms for children under 16. So we can see that there's a rise, and that needs to be more, people need to take more attention. The government has to step in, and so on and so forth. Now, but beyond the numbers, how do we track emotional bullying and social exclusion, or perhaps digital trauma as well? Are there signs or telltale signs? Can we you know, look at our kids. For me, I just ask my kids, how's your day in school? And you can actually observe their reactions. What other kinds of mechanism or methods can we assess a child?
That's really wonderful. Like, I really like that you shared that. Okay, there's a few parts, so let's try to do this methodically. I think what you mentioned is something that I really like to sort of emphasize on and highlight as well. Some things are really basic things, just like just now I said, demonstrating good behavior to children is really basic things. And having safe relationships and safe spaces and fostering that type of communication is really, really important and essential. And that's also maybe related to how we live our lives today, and whether we take time to do things that matter in terms of spending time with our children. It's both quantity and quality.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there's so much emphasis on quality that we sort of just let go of the quantity totally, but the quantity and quality both matter in terms of how we take care of our children. So ensuring that as parents mainly, or guardians, that we have thought about and consciously fostered good relationship with our children from early on. And I think maybe there's something for us to think about if culturally we've not done this. But in today's time, we definitely need to establish that one-on-one relationship, that each parent and each child needs to have some form of relationship, so that every child has at least 5 trusted adults that they know they can go to. So in any case, they would be able to say things. So if we can't say the basic things, then it's difficult for us to say the difficult things.
That's right.
So, and in the same way, if we see our children every day or we notice them, we can easily notice a change of behavior. So this is not just parents, but also teachers. So we need to ensure that children get that type of attention and they are surrounded by safe adults that they can go to, and those adults notice changes in them. So, you know, those changes could be changes in mood, or they change in their behavior, and if they're usually loud or happy, then they're quiet, sort of not mixing with others. It may be the way that they dress changes. So these things can only be seen through the basic things. Once we establish the basic things, then we can notice those changes as well. And one more thing, I know you're about to ask me a question, but what's really important is to understand that bullying and the changing patterns of bullying that you mentioned early on does not happen in a vacuum. These are not isolated cases. So we're not just looking at this one kid is problematic or thinking about children as problematic cases, but we must understand it as something that happens at the communal level and at the social level as well, so that we don't address it as a punitive kind of punishment, and we just punish one person and we think we've solved bullying. So we can't think of it like that. All of us are responsible in some ways, and others, of course, more responsible or have more authority to make those changes.
I like what you say, because especially if the cases of initial bullying is spotted earlier, and that's always the saying, prevention is better than cure, right? So you prevent it before it really, you know, it go into a vicious cycle. And I think it's really important for parents, the teachers and the communities to really observe these children. And we're talking about fault lines between generations. I like how you mentioned that there must be an open communication or space where a child can have an avenue to talk through the difficult times and through the good times as well. And research shows nearly 50% of affected teens are both perpetrators and also victims. What does this bully-victim cycle reveal about our social support system currently?
All right, so like I said just now, when we think about bullying, we must see that it's not an isolated case. Number one, it's not a one-off event that a child, for example, like you said just now, it's important to see that children can be both perpetrators and they can also be victims. And it may happen even at the same time, right? And we must understand that children learn from what they see and what is allowed for them to do within those spaces. So when we look at the issue of bullying, we must not see two people only or two groups of people only. We must also see that there are other people who are, like we said, parents, teachers, bystanders, other children. So those are important contexts for us to understand. So if we understand that, we can also understand that in terms of why a child bullies, right? So it could be that they've seen it somewhere else, or it is allowed for them to do it and there is no correction, or we haven't done the prevention in terms of how we treat each other, and we haven't corrected it halfway. And I think most of us, for me as a parent, my child has been bullied before, right? And he, alhamdulillah, he has the opportunity to come to me or some other adults and has that space to report it. And in the same way, I don't want that reporting to cause harm to the other child, because the other child should be able to, be addressed properly and have time to learn what not to do. Because when we think about smaller children, maybe it's about taking your candy and my candy. If we don't teach about how to respect each other's spaces, autonomous body, decisions about ourselves, consent, these are basic things that we may not think that they relate, but at the end of the day, it sort of aggravates itself. So we learn behaviors through what we see and what is allowed for us to do. And so children learn to do that, whether they've seen it at home or whether it was allowed for them to do in smaller kind of spaces, and then they sort of copy that. And if we don't have bystanders who are actively addressing them, or adults who are actively showing better ways of doing things, then it will get worse and worse.
Now, bullying cases has been so rampant, especially in the last couple of months, and even right now we have a case in Sabah as well. What can parents or even teachers misread bullying today by, thinking that kids are just being kids? What do you have to say for that?
Yeah, so I think this is that culture that I was talking about. I think with some of the recent more controversial cases, what we need to understand is that when things become viral, number one, there's a lot of misinformation around it, but at the same time, it riles up a certain emotion, and it may lead to more people feeling a bit more brave, or they feel that there's more safe spaces for them to share their stories, right? So as viewers, or as critical viewers and public, we should also understand that it may not reflect that there's suddenly like a huge number happening today. It is more of a reflection of what happens. So teachers and parents, I think we must take the responsibility to learn more about what we need to do, which is the prevention part first, and then how to address these issues. And what it means to be a child is also important for us to understand, right? Because children become adults. So if certain behaviors we want them to learn and values for them to have, then we need to correct them. So it will take a lot of work, because we're seeing a systemic kind of issue here with bullying, but we need to address them, and we need to have a little bit more will to make those changes, instead of, most of us are bystanders all the time. So whether or not we have the courage to say, hey, don't do that, or you shouldn't treat your friend like that, this is not okay, rather than this is too much hassle. And if we have the authority and power to make better changes in terms of, okay, we need to set up better systems in our school for reporting, or whistleblowing, for example, to ensure that when a child reports it, there's no repercussion. What are systems for us to do that? So one of the best ways for us to do this is to learn from others who have done it better. So there would be schools that have addressed it swifter, faster, more discreet, right? So it's important that it's addressed quickly, but it's also done discreetly to ensure that the child that is being corrected, for example, has a safe space to grow and improve themselves. So this can only be understood when we think about it early on, because it's hard for us to feel that it's okay if the bullying case is so severe. Then we might feel like they shouldn't be allowed to go to school, right? So it's always preventive and early intervention. But in those cases, we would need now to think about what are ways in which we can do interventions for more severe cases, and how can we rehabilitate young people. So if they are used to this and they're probably accustomed to some of these types of cultures, then we would need as a society to work together in terms of changing those cultures. It will take some time, but we sort of have to work together to achieve it.
Are there examples that you've come across that provide that kind of systematic management for bullying cases?
I think there are some schools that have done that. I can't mention names, but I think what we can do is we can look at some examples from other countries as well. For example, in the case of Finland, they do research on it. So whatever that they've done, it's sort of research, data-driven kind of examples. And at our country would be really good for our academics and, for example, for certain bodies to work on that as well.
Now, the Prime Minister, Dato Sri Anwar, also has urged, the stern action against threats to nation stability, and even the PM feels that we need to step up our game because bullying, degrading others based on race, lineage, skin color, or any basis must be stopped, and he champions that as well. And I also read an article where the Sultan as well, Sultan Ibrahim, also mentioned about bullying cases and how we need to tackle this from the root itself. Now, why does compassion and conversation, we've been talking about this, often work better than punishing and in breaking bullying cycles?
I think I like to start with conversation first, then compassion, because sometimes, especially for children, it's not so easy to teach, okay, compassion, this is the definition for compassion. But I think through conversations and allowing children space to talk, I think that's something maybe we've not done a lot in our society, because typically maybe culturally we learn that adults are the ones that speak and they're visible and children sort of sit quietly at the side. But I think that's changing. So that's a good thing that we see in our country. So it starts with conversation and talking and allowing space for children to speak. And then teaching children to talk to each other and to listen to each other. So from conversations, there's the element of expression and articulation of emotion, which is really important. And then also there is listening. And then from the listening, empathy and compassion sort of come into play. So it's something that's simple, but that can only be done where we allow space for it to happen. So we have to think about in which spaces have we designed and kept safe for children to have those. Maybe for us, we have those spaces with our sons, but what about if you have 5 children? Can you make space for that? If the classroom has 50 children, would the teacher have space to talk to each child? So it must be designed in our life. It cannot be just we expect it to happen, but we don't design those spaces for that to happen.
In the Asian culture, we are much more reserved in our conversation. But I guess in these times, I think parents are more conversational with their parents, with their kids and parents. There's a two-way communication, and that's so important. And could Malaysia benefit from models like Finland's Kiva? You mentioned earlier about schools that have adopted certain methodologies that help combat this bullying. Perhaps you can elaborate on this.
So it's thinking about things more systemically and systematically. So we have to do it intentionally. We cannot just assume that it will happen. I think we sort of take things for granted because maybe culturally we used to be people of high value, and values have always sort of driven our actions. That's why maybe in the past it's okay if children don't speak too much because the adults sort of take care of them, and we take care of our values very much. In today's context, maybe we're sort of losing that a little bit. We're more driven by other things. Maybe we're distracted by having to work more hours, chasing after more material things and things like that. So if we're thinking about doing things more systematically, which is the way that we do things now, we measure everything, right? And we want to design everything intentionally, then we have to think about our schools in that way. So we can put it in place and that there are systems in place. So it has to start with the prevention. So what part of our curriculum and the day-to-day time of the children. So sometimes in Malaysia, unfortunately, we have a tendency to introduce things in the curriculum, right? But we have to also be realistic in terms of the quality of delivery and also the amount of time that's allowed to do that. And whether that's feasible in terms of resources. Do we allocate resources for children to have one-on-one time with their teachers? If there's 50 children in the class, how does that even happen, And then also in terms of thinking about how do we measure values being passed on? So surely it cannot be an exam. We know that that doesn't work, right? So we need to think about it like that. We're doing prevention programs. So it's not just about having a campaign where we talk to children about it. They must also have opportunities and time to learn how to do it while being guided. So the practicality of that aspect is important. And then of course there's intervention. How can we ensure that there's systematic opportunities for children to report? And there's whistleblowing like I mentioned just now. And then how can they move quickly and discreetly to ensure that things sort of are monitored, and then that happens. And
currently, do you think that what is happening in schools, is it enough? Is there enough safeguarding for these children? I know that I read an article this morning as well. The education minister, she mentioned that it must be put in the KPI. But sometimes, you know, when things happen, then we start to move, right? But we should do it before something happens, right? So your thoughts on this?
I think to answer it easily and plainly, no, I don't think we have things in place yet. We're still quite a long way to go in terms of that. And I think maybe we've sort of taken that for granted and in not thinking about it. While KPI may be helpful, I think we also have to steer away from, you know, just putting out numbers so that we can see that the results are genuine. And then also in thinking about, yes, unfortunately, bad things happen and then it grabs our attention, but I also see it as a positive thing today, meaning that, okay, we have everybody's attention. So like I said, this is such an important time. We have everyone's attention, so the narrative should be correct. It should be that it moves us to make actions. Instead of wanting to put a blame on a group of people or one person, it should empower us all to recognize that this is an issue all of us have work to do together. And we need to work together in order for us to ensure that all children are safe.
I just saw a picture earlier in the screen. Even the sports minister, you know, encourages children to play sports. Perhaps that is an avenue to release that kind of tensions that is building up between friendships. I think that's fantastic as well. So how do we continue to keep the conversation alive beyond moments of crises so safety and trust are built every day? Your thoughts on this?
I want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is on, I think it always starts with the family, and I think we haven't emphasized this enough. Because when we think about family in the past, it's sort of, we always have a parent at home. But in today's economic context, or you know, the living expenses and things like that, we typically have two parents, or we have also higher rates of single parent households. So we know that maybe we have to rethink about how we structure our society in terms of keeping people together. Secondly, in terms of neighborhoods. So in the past, we take care of each other. We have a strong, you know, community, kejiranan and things like that. And we can go and eat at our neighbor's house and nobody's going to think that your mom is really bad for, you know, keeping you hungry. It's just normal, just come and eat at my house, you know. So to foster those types of community spirit is important in order for us to be more aware of what's happening. I think in the last few years, we've talked about you know, being busybody in a good way, but I don't think it's just being about busybody, but it's also to care and extend a little bit more help and also relationship with others, and that allows for us to sort of build those really important bonds among people, so that everybody has more than just one person to look out for them, and that in the case of parents, it's not just, the focus is not on only one parent who's in a single parent household to look into that, but they would also know that, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and this, I have a village, and the village is taking care of our children, and we're sort of doing that. So those allow more conversations to happen, but I think the conversation must be directed properly as well, that we're not just thinking about being angry, and I think that also is something for us to think about. Yes, we are upset and we are really angry that something like this has happened, but what do we make out of it, and how do we sort of improve things forward? So it's not just to focus on, you know, our sadness and our anger, but also how do we shift the conversation to something that's more empowering and also uplifting.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fatimah, for sharing your perspectives on this show. Now, of course, we know bullying is a vile act that not only causes physical harm, but also leaves deep emotional scars and in some cases cost lives. Now, the conversations around bullying must continue between parents and children, teachers and students, colleagues and peers, like we've mentioned earlier, because ending bullying starts with all of us. I'm Le Song and this is Dr. Fatimah. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow us for conversations on issues that matters.